Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Jenny White.
How are you?
I'm good. Aren't you excited? The stock market's like at all-time high. Don't you have more money in your pockets? You feel like this is the best country in the world, even though you have the highest amount of credit card debt ever. You've got the most bank defaults ever. You've got the most car repos ever. I mean, this is the greatest economy ever. I feel good. I'm so excited.
Wow, good morning, Michael.
I need to give, you know what? I need to give like every week or so. I need to just give a little stat, just a little economic update, just every now and then. I mean, we're only what 35 trillion in debt. I mean, that's nothing. What's 35?
Well, I mean, when you can print more, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's nothing. Monopoly.
I mean, we just paid what $7 billion worth of college education. I didn't get any money for my college. I had to pay for my own way.
Okay, so is the whole objective this morning just to start out to really make me mad? I mean, is that?
No, it's clown world. It's clown world.
So what you're just doing is poking me? You're poking the bear.
I'm just priming the bear for Representative Conley. That's what I'm doing. I'm priming the bear.
Well, but we like Representative Conley, and I don't want to be the bear.
I'm so happy to talk to her. I mean, here's the deal. We should, as citizens, we should always be going down to the Capitol and talking to our representatives and our senators all the time anyway, but we don't do it. So we need to have Representative Conley on so we can actually talk to her and let people know just what it's like to talk to your rep.
Well, and I definitely agree with, and you know, she's a really nice person to talk to. So let's bring her on this morning. So are you going to start like Michael and start?
How about this? There's 49 days left in the state legislature for this session.
Quick, let's get you guys out of there.
Is that good news? Yeah.
Before any more damage is done.
That's exactly right. The less time you're in there, the less laws we have.
That's true. That's true. I think, now that you mentioned that has been one of the things this year that has been the most interesting, that I think we sent roughly 270 bills over to the Senate. I think roughly the same number came over to us, but I don't think you're going to see the same number go through the House and Senate this year as what's happened in years past. I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to what the Senate is doing, but I know that on Wednesdays they're having A and B committee, and that's all they're doing on Wednesday is dealing with money. And I'm told that they're keeping a running tally of how much money they're spending every Wednesday through the A and B committee, all these bills that are passed that have the fiscal impact. And so
let's make sure people know what A and B means. Appropriations and budget.
Appropriations and budget. Yep. Yeah. That's how our state tax dollars and our funding is spent every year. Yeah. And of course, there are bills that come through, legislation that comes through all the time, every session that has fiscal impact. And so it is scrutinized by the appropriations and budget committees. We have subcommittees for the majority of our committees. So like education has an A and B committee. Transportation has an A and B committee. Health and Human Services has an A and B committee. Child welfare, I believe they have their own A and B committee. I haven't really paid any, I couldn't tell you which all has A and B committees, but we have appropriations and requests from agencies and other organizations all the time, every year, asking for money, for state money. And so that gets scrutinized very heavily, I believe, by the A and B, the full A and B committee, which is where there's, I believe, all of the A and B subcommittee chairs are on that committee, plus some other members are on that committee. And so everything that has a fiscal impact goes through that A and B committee. And of course, we're responsible for the budget in the House. And I believe there's an April 1st deadline for the budget.
I thought I saw that on one of the press releases, because I get all the press releases as they come out. I thought I saw that.
Yeah, and I don't believe we've met that date very often.
Well, it is the 12th.
Yeah, and we don't have a budget. They are working on it, but like I said, the when you have deadlines for your A and B subcommittees that aren't until the end of, maybe that budget is supposed to be May 1st. I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and look. I should have checked before we got on here, but I didn't anticipate us having a conversation about it. And so when you've got a deadline,
that's me shaking it up, Sherrie.
I know. You always throw me some curveballs. How about some softballs here? But when you've got your A and B subcommittees, the deadline's not until, I think, this week, or maybe next week. Then it's kind of hard to get a full budget until you have all of those bills come through. So it might be May 1st.
Maybe that's it. All I know is that I was seeing press releases come to my inbox from Pro Tem Treat. Mm-hmm. We're just not going to hear any more House bills until the House gets their budget over here. And, it seems to me like we're playing King of the Hill again. Yeah. Which I'm not really sure how well that serves the Oklahoma citizenry, but, maybe political games, maybe that's just what they do there. I don't know.
Well, I kind of understand it. It's some political posturing, because both the leadership of both chambers has said we're not going to hear the other chambers' bills until the other chamber starts hearing our bills. And so you have to say, though, that if the Senate doesn't hear any House bills, how can we expect to be heard their bills? And because that would mean that every Senate bill would go to the governor's desk and no House members would have a voice. And so you all don't get properly represented by the people that you send to the Capitol if you're only getting one chamber's bills to the governor's desk. And so I completely understand the posturing there. It really does make sense, but it's kind of silly because it holds up progress. And and it sounds like children. I mean, we've all had children, and I'm not going to give you this until you give me that. I mean, just stop. I mean, I just don't think it's a good look, and I don't think it inspires confidence in the Oklahoma citizenry. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people want to see this pull and tug. I mean, we were talking before we came on about a bicameral legislature, and I sometimes wonder when we get into this pull and tug thing, there are states that have a unicameral legislature. I mean, and they do get bills passed. And, you were telling me that you like that. And I mean, we had a great conversation. Why do you like the bicameral system? Well, I believe that we need that three-legged stool. I believe that we need the diversity of the two. I hate using that word, but I do. It fits here. The diversity of what the two chambers are responsible for. The House is responsible for, setting up the budget. And then, of course, the leadership for the budget system get together between the House and the Senate and decide where the money is going to go. And of course, the governor is involved in that as well. Once the budget gets, kind of set, then the two chambers sit down together, and then the governor has a say in it as well. And so I think that it best serves the people when you've got more eyes on it. And of course, in the unicameral system, you'd have the same number of eyes. Maybe I don't know that you would have 149 members looking at something if you had a unicameral system. I haven't studied other states to see what that looks like. But, if you think back, we were talking about this before, that if you think back whenever our country was founded, when they went to the Constitutional Convention, they went in and they sat as states. Each of the colonies had their own table. And regardless of where the members stood as far as policy views, they all sat at the same table. And the states came together and, and kind of fought each other, if you want to look at it that way, that they were trying to ensure that their state was represented inside that body. And it wasn't about Republican and Democrat. It was about the state. And so in this case, I don't know, then they transitioned to a bicameral system later.
Right.
Once they were, I don't know at what year that happened. Mike, you might know. Michael, you may know more about that than I do.
I don't know.
And I should know. I taught it. I should remember. But anyway, I don't know. I just feel like the more eyes we have on it, the more people that we have, putting their 2 cents in and voting. Because if you think about it, when the bills get put into the House, we've got, for example, I sit on transportation and I sat on education. Both of those agencies or both of those committees have A and B subcommittees. And so everything that was a fiscal impact went through that A and B subcommittee, and we talked about the money piece of it. And so then we get to decide whether or not we pass Senate bills that have fiscal impact, and the Senate gets to decide whether they want to pass House bills that have fiscal impact. And so you've got more eyes on the money being spent, and I believe that helps the people be represented better.
Well, and I do see your point, but and I guess this wouldn't change anything, because what I'm finding and what I've found a lot lately, so not even back in the 2010 era when I first started dealing with legislation, what I found now is there are certain people, and I'm going to say in both the Senate and the House, there are certain people who have quite a bit of power. And if you want a bill run and they don't want it run, then they'll just see that it never sees the light of day. Or if they don't want it, even if, let's just say, it makes it onto a calendar or into a committee, and they'll figure out a way to get it killed in a committee. And that's the thing that just really, I'm to the point now where I won't even go. I don't even go to that place anymore, because it's so stacked with people who are stacked against me as a landowner and a farmer that I just don't even, it's not even worth my time to go, because there's a group of people who are out in my area that literally will quash bills that benefit the people if they don't benefit them. And so it's just not even worth my time to do anything. So
I will say that, so when bills get filed, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, but maybe not in this depth, but when bills get filed, they're all under, like, for example, education policy is under Title 70. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So each subject matter has its own title. And then once the bills are filed, the floor committee gets together and makes a decision where those bills need to go into which committee. And so every education bill pretty much gets filed into the education committee unless unless it maybe doesn't have language in it. It goes into a rules committee.
Yeah.
And then the chairs, they do have a lot of power. The committee chair has a lot of power to decide whether or not those bills get heard. And they do have people talking to them in their ears about certain things. And I believe that the majority of them do their due diligence in reaching out to, groups who represent people to make the decision. What do you think about this? Is this good language? How is this going to impact your agency, your organization, that sort of thing? And then, of course, they have some that are coming to them going, please don't run this bill.
Yeah.
And I do believe that there is a problem there. What I think is that if it gets filed, it should get a hearing.
Yeah.
In the committee. And that's been one of my complaints. Why do we put people on a committee to have them hear language if they're not going to hear all of it? If I file a bill, I may be filing it on behalf of a constituent. And if that language doesn't get heard in committee for those committee members to get to make the decision as to whether or not they believe that bill is viable or not, then my constituent is not getting represented. They are stopping my constituent's voice, and I don't like that. I feel like, I tell you what, I have not been to a whole lot of different committee meetings other than the ones that I have sat on since my tenure. But one of the best.
Well, and let me make this point. Oftentimes they put them right on top of each other. So how are you going to?
Yeah, it does make it difficult. I mean,
you can't
may
leave
be,
your committee to go to another one that's meeting at the same time. So let's make sure people understand it's not just because you don't want to.
Yes. Thank you for that. But one of the things that the committee that I have just absolutely loved sitting on, and that has been State Powers. Jay Stiegel is the committee chair of that committee, and he runs that like a true working committee. I believe he runs it the way they should be run. And that is that, he runs bills in the committee, and if there's conversation and need to tweak something, even if he's not, 100% on board with the bill, we will sit and have a conversation about what needs to be changed, how it needs to be changed. And if it needs to be just killed completely, we'll kill it.
Well, and let's put in a plug there for Jay. We may need to have him on because he's being run against now by the Yukon mayor, who was really a detriment to that community during COVID and does seem to have some kind of a queen complex. So, I mean, definitely need to get Jay back in there. And those are good points for the public to know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I would definitely recommend having Jay on and having him talk about the way he runs his committee and his philosophy on the committees. He is, I believe that he has announced maybe that he's running, I'm trying to think if I saw his name for Speaker Pro Tem.
Oh, okay.
So you may ask him about that as well, whether or not he's planning to do that. Seems like I saw that he was doing that. And I have loved sitting on that committee because it is a true working committee, and I believe that it is run the way it absolutely should be done. And so I also watched the Senate Committee on Education this week because my bill 3958 was being heard in the Senate Committee, and I was very interested in the way the Senate does their committees as well. And I truly believe that I really like the way they run their committees. I don't know if you've noticed the difference in the way that their committees are run versus what the House committees are run, but you might go back and pay attention to that and maybe.
So how do you feel like there's a difference? Because I'm trying to think in I'm putting on my thinking cap and trying to think, the House Education Committee, I've sat in on, hundreds of those, and then hundreds of the Senate Education Committee ones. And I'm not really sure that I can think of a difference right now. What is the difference that you're thinking of?
So in the Senate committee, the first thing they have to have is a due pass and a second in order to be able to even discuss legislation in a committee. And I believe that is it's either in Robert's rules or it's in Mason's manual, one of the two. And I didn't realize that. I've glossed over Mason's manual and Robert's rules over the 6 years, but it hasn't been something that I have studied thoroughly because I'm not, I'm a committee vice chair, but I'm not a committee chairman.
Sure.
And probably something that I should have done, looking back now, I should have studied those manuals. But I was, when you go in there, you don't really get a whole lot of training, and you are left to your own devices to be able to figure out the system. And you're eating an elephant when you go in there. You're drinking from a fire hose, and so it is so hard to know exactly what you need to be studying when you first go in. So I would love to see some training happen with the new legislators that come in. I believe
that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point, Sherrie. I agree with you. Why can they not have some kind of a primer on Robert's Rules of Order, for example? Because I know in the Senate, they have absolutely stomped on that book numerous times. So
I have my opinions about that, but I'm not going to share those here.
Okay.
We can talk about that later. But
okay.
Anyway, so I would love to see that happen. I believe that the way that the system is, that there's, kind of like what you were talking about, a little bit too much control, and I completely support Floor Leader Eccles. And one of the things that he talks about is giving the committee chairman complete control over their committees. And on the one hand, I agree with that. But then on the other hand, if you've got somebody who has some kind of vendetta or personal, who isn't able to separate their personal feelings from the governmental business, then you've got a problem.
Well, and I will point out, I'm not going to drag you into this, but I will say this myself. That's what we saw with Pro Tem Treat last year when too many people voted for the person who was running against him for Speaker Pro Tem. He just pulled all of their committees away from them and substituted his own people. Well, that's outrageous. I mean, that's simply nothing. That's just flat tyranny. And we shouldn't have tyranny in the bodies that represent the people in this state. And for why people didn't just absolutely become outraged and incensed and say all kinds of horrible things about the speaker for doing that kind of thing. I don't know why, because I just found that to be absolutely.
It's tyrannical. It
is completely.
And we shouldn't be allowing our personal feings to get in the way of state's business. And
that doesn't mean you can't have them.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you can't have them, but you can't drag those in and impose those on other people who, like you said so well just a minute ago, you represent a group of people. And so what he's doing by playing that game, playing that little King George tyranny trip,
you're silencing people.
It is. And the people that voted for you.
Yeah. Well, you're taking the house. But if you think about it, I mean, if my senator, is on the outs with Treat, or whoever's in leadership, then my district is truly not getting a voice. When you look at it, that if a Senate member is being targeted over there and their voice isn't getting heard, then the people that they represent, the 100,000 people that they represent, they're not getting a voice over there. And then if there's a problem with the House member and leadership over in the House, and that person's voice is being silenced, then you have a whole swath of people who is being silenced all the way across the board. And I think that not enough people know what happens at the Capitol. I mean, I had no idea what was going on at the Capitol before I got there. I paid attention to, federal politics. I was not a state politics person, and I regret that now. But one of my goals, kind of pivoting to what I'm going to do when I get out, is one of my goals is I want to educate people how the House and the Senate run and how important it is for us to be paying attention. And I know that people want to be entertained, and government and politics is not entertaining. It's frustrating. But if people want to hold on to their freedoms and they want their tax dollars spent the way they should be spent, and not being given to a bunch of organizations that are not going to be held accountable. Agencies are held accountable to a certain extent. But organizations that get money are not held accountable at all.
Or private businesses.
Yeah. And so, people have got to pay attention. They complain about, being taxed to death, but they're not doing their due diligence in order to figure out why they're being taxed to death. And that's kind of the message that I want to send, the everyday voters. And, I'm not sure how to get that message out. I'm still working on that piece, but, going to the GOP, that's preaching to the choir, right? That doesn't help. You've got to get, in order to be able to talk to new people, you've got to get new people to the GOP. So is it that you go out and recruit people to the county GOPs, or is it that you figure out how to get into these organizations and into these groups and, get in front of people who maybe aren't necessarily, they're not involved in politics, or in their state party, and really should be their county party too. I mean, it all comes together. So, and it's also fractured. We've got to do something. And I'm not saying that we all should be unified, because that's not the answer either. Unity is not the answer. People keep saying unity, and that is not the answer. Coming together and having civil discourse and talking about the issues and coming up with a solution, just like they did at the Constitutional Convention when they created our founding documents. That's what they did. They argued it out, they talked it out, and they may have hated each other when they walked away from there, but they didn't let how they felt about each other personally impact the governance of our nation, the founding of our nation. We've got to get back to that. It's not about unity. We don't want groupthink. We want smart people who are articulate. Even the people who are not articulate, come tell your opinions, share your opinions. Tell us what you are worried about. Tell us what you're concerned about. So many times, and I'm getting on a soapbox, I'm sorry, but so many times I hear at the Capitol, I hear my fellow members say, well, I didn't hear from anybody in my district about that. That's a problem. If you're not hearing from people that you are representing, that they're not sharing with you how they feel about something, that is a problem.
Yeah, but and I hate to be the downer on, because I agree with you 100% on what you're saying. I mean, so don't think I'm arguing with that. But here's what bothers me. So I have a state senator who literally, it wouldn't matter if I contacted Grant Green or not. I mean, he was elected by a group of people to do a specific thing, and it's them who he answers to, and it's not going to be me. So there's not even a point in me writing or calling or going up there, because I'm not the person that got him elected.
Mm-hmm. Well,
same thing with my House of Representatives member, who is a darling man, and he's certainly very communicative, but I can't get him to get beyond the people that he feels like he owes for his position to hear what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think, Jenny, if it's just, let's say it's just you going up there, that's one thing. But if it's you and then someone else and someone else and someone else and someone else and I mean, that'll wear them out to the point to where they have to say, oh, okay, something is going on here. I'm going to have to, change course a little bit.
Well, and to be fair, people run, I believe the majority of the people that run for office, whether it is city or towns, school boards, county government, state government, federal government, I believe that they all run with the notion that they want to do the right thing. Now, do we agree what the right thing is? No, we're not going to. And that's fine because we need all voices. But they get up there thinking that they're going for one reason, and then they stay for the wrong reasons. And I'm just going to use myself as an example. Whenever I ran for office, my promise to the people that voted for me and to my district was that I would put kids and families first. And that whenever I felt like it was time for me to go, that I would leave, whether it was at the end of, 4 years, 6 years, or 12 years, that I would vacate my seat and let somebody else take over. And that is exactly what I'm doing. I have listened to the people. Now, am I going to agree with every person that sends me an email and says, please vote yes or no on this? No, I'm not going to. And I have to take everything into consideration. I take into consideration what people send to me and their concerns on something. But there's a lot of times there's background things that I know about. I try so hard to look downstream to see where something might go and what the potential risks might be there, and try to take that into consideration whenever I vote. And then, of course, politics does get in the way sometimes, and you feel like you have to vote a certain way in order to make some people happy. And I personally, I'm just going to tell you a time I was sitting there. We were voting on something. It was school related, and Speaker McCall came up and sat down beside me, and we engaged in a conversation about a few things. And when the vote, I think we were debating, they were debating on the floor about something, and we were getting ready to come up for the vote. They were finished with the debate, finished with questions, finished with the debate, and it was time to vote. And he turns and he looks at me and he says, "Don't go red." And I said, "I'm going red," as he got up and walked off. And that happens sometimes. I mean, that's the only time, that he has ever said, and he was suggesting that for me because he knew that I was going to get backlash, not because that's how he wanted me to vote, but because he knew that I was going to take a lot of crap over that, political crap. And so, but I stood my ground. I had, some very strong feelings about it. And I knew that I was going to get harassed over it, but I did it anyway. Yeah. And I've never felt pressured by Speaker McCall. There's a lot of talk about people thinking that there's a lot of pressure from leadership and other. I would say that the pressure comes more from outside the building by way of organizations and associations than it necessarily does from the top. I mean, there's times when there's things that, we want to present a united front as much as we can as a Republican party in the Capitol. But, if you feel like you've got to go red on something that the majority of the House is going to go green on, people do it, and they feel the freedom to do that. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people feel like there's a lot of pressure put on us by leadership to vote a certain way, and that's just not true. A lot of people probably put pressure on themselves, or they sense pressure, feeling that if they don't do something a certain way, then they'll lose their committee, or they'll lose their title or whatever. And that has happened. But it doesn't happen. It's not something that happens every day on everything. And it's just not, it's really not that way. But I don't know how I ended up on that. But anyway.
Well, let me ask you this, because one of the reasons we wanted to have you on today was you're not running again.
No, not right now anyway.
First question, isn't it kind of freeing not to have to do that?
Yeah. It has been one of the,
because you guys have to do it every 2 years.
Every 2
so it's
years.
like you're downstream thinking, how am I going to raise the money to get the next election? That's tough.
Well, and there's I'm not sure how many members ended up without a primary or a general election. I'd have to go back and look at those numbers. Normally, I'm pretty on that. As soon as filing is over, I go and look at how many of us have races and how many of us don't.
Well, I read that this particular year was the worst in terms of getting new people in to run, that there were more seats in both the House and the Senate that had absolutely nobody running against them this year than there ever has been before. And I think that's a huge commentary. I don't want to get off on this track, but I just want to say this. I think that's a huge commentary to what people think about government right now. I think people think that those of us who are engaged think it's pretty useless at this point. So I think that's part of the reason why people are not, rerunning. But finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
I'm always a downer.
Yeah. No, but I'm going to tell you the other side of what I think, and then we can move on. I think that it is representative of the climate of politics, because that's one of the things that I have been saying, since, probably the end of last session, was that this next election cycle, if you've got a challenger, it is going to be nasty. I truly believe, and then I believe in 2026, it'll be I think it'll be worse for state politics this year. I think that with it being a presidential year and how horrible the last 3.5 years of our lives have been under the Biden presidency, I think that
presidency. Sorry, couldn't help it.
Yeah. Kingship. It's more of a kingship than anything. But I think that I think it'll be nasty this year, and I think in 2026, I think that you'll see that governor's race be even worse. That's going to be horrible. So anyway, I think it's more the climate of politics than anything. I'm not running because, like I said, I feel like, when session was over, my campaign consultant came to me and he was like, okay, we need to get busy. We got to start raising money. And I just kept pushing him off because I just felt a tugging, that maybe it was time for me to go. And so something happened in August, and somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm gonna run for your seat. And I was completely shocked because this person was supposed to be running against, my senator, which, whatever, that's his business. Anybody can file. It is a free country. The last I checked, and anybody can run for any office if they want to, and so he is completely free to run for whatever office he wants to. But he came to me and said, well, I'm not going to run against you. I'm going to run against, I'm not going to run against Jessica. I'm going to run against you. And I was like, oh, well, okay. And so at that point I was like, okay, well, maybe all of this, what I've been hearing about not running was actually, the real thing. And so
that was like a confirmation, you think?
A confirmation for me.
Yeah.
And I am not supporting that gentleman because of some other things that have happened that I feel like he is a nice man. but I don't believe that he is suited for a climate where there's a lot of pressure put on you to vote one way or the other, or to stand one way or another when it comes to agencies and organizations. And I feel like you have to have a backbone. You have to be able to stand up to people, and you have to be willing to speak your mind. And I'm hearing from a lot of voters that he is unwilling to do that, and that he is, when they ask him questions, that he kind of flip-flops. And so I made the decision that I wasn't going to support him, but
is there anybody running that you do support?
Yes.
Okay.
And her name is Olivia Snow. I would love for you to have her.
Olivia Snow.
Olivia Snow. I would love for you to have her on your podcast. Okay. I had endorsed someone for a split second, maybe a week or two. And then I had some kind of second thoughts about that, and then decided to pull my support for this other person. And I just had this feeling that somebody was going to come in at the last minute that I was going to be able to fully get behind. And Olivia is that person. And so she texted me and said, hey, what do you think? And I was like, yes, you would be absolutely amazing.
Okay,
and
good.
So yeah, I'm completely supporting her, and I think she'd be wonderful.
Okay, well, you'll have to hook us up, and we'll get her on too.
I will. And so anyway, so I just felt like I wasn't supposed to run, and the feeling that the thoughts that have been going through my head, I'll just share that with you, have been that I ended up off of the education committee. And it's really the reason why I went to the legislature, was to work on education. And working on education in the legislature was kind of, it was kind of taken away from me, I feel like. And so there's no point in me being in the legislature. It goes back to that promise to my constituents, that when I felt like I was no longer getting, doing what I went there to do, then I would walk away. And so
that's disappointing.
It is. But education, fixing education is not about laws. It's about, some of it is, but I feel like there's, just like my bill, okay, 3958, we are trying to shut down the individual communication between a school employee and a student. And I say individual because I mean texting, instant messenger, Snapchat, Grindr. Yes.
I hate it when you bring that one up.
I know. Wow. Ew. But
sorry,
we're that's what we're going for. And I have had an OSBI person tell me, I've had DAs tell me, I have had sheriff's departments tell me that this is a good bill.
Okay,
that it will help. It's not going to do everything we need it to do, but
it's a start. I mean,
it's a start. It is.
If we can at least get something somewhere in place where there's some kind of fear of doing what they're doing, because as well as I do, predators they're not going to be deterred by a whole lot of things, because it's a mental illness. I mean, they can't, it's hard to stop themselves, like being an alcoholic or anything else. So you have to put some kind of, for lack of a better term, fear of God into them to make them stop doing what they're doing. So, I'm super supportive of that. I mean, we can't always have the best thing, but we can have something to at least, go from. So, good for you on that, honestly.
So, so that has been my focus. I've done a lot of research, and I think last time I was on, maybe I gave you some statistics. Did I give you statistics last time?
I don't think so.
So, in my research since 2010, there have been just what I can find on the internet. There have been 40 predators in the school systems, and that's just 2010.
In Oklahoma.
40 predators in the state of Oklahoma. Now, keep in mind, when you hear 40 predators, that's not 40 kids. Right. That's 40 predators. And right. The research shows that the predators could have anywhere from 75 to, more victims. And of course, that depends on, how long they are allowed to remain in the system or unreported and not caught. And so we've got a lot of children out there that, let's just use Ron Arthur, for example, out in Shawnee. He worked for Shawnee for 17 years. Correct. If he was preying on children for 17 years, we've only got 3 or 4 of his victims that have come forward. How many more out there are victims of this man? We've got others that have been that have abused kids and have been allowed to move on to other schools. That's called passing the trash. I think I mentioned that earlier in another podcast. And we've got to stop the administrators. We've got to stop the school boards from allowing these people to just move on to other schools and to prey on other kids. They're passing the trash and getting it out of their school. And, I have to say that if a predator sees that a school is going to allow somebody to quietly resign and move on to another school, what is going to stop another predator from going and applying for that job at that school, knowing that they're going to be able to stay there, either 1, undetected, or 2, allowed to just move on? And so one of the things that we've seen is that I asked for some numbers from the State Department of Education, and without talking too much about it, there have been 32 license or certifications that have been either suspended, revoked, or there's another term. I don't know. It'll come to me in a minute. But either suspended or revoked. 32 since Ryan Walters has been in position.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is a lot, and a lot of that is new reports, but some of it is also reports that are held over from Joy Hoffmeister's administration, where there was very little, if anything, done about those people. So,
yeah, that was going to be my question: is how many did Joy Hoffmeister revoke?
Yeah. So we're looking at, I believe the number was 114 total from the 10 years, 8 years of Joy Hoffmeister and 2 under Superintendent Walters that have been reported, and 32 so far have been revoked under Walters. And so,
well, good for him on that, for sure.
And there's a lot of work to be done there. We've just had a new one reported this week out in Stigler. And so that makes, get this number, okay, I said 40 over the last 14 years, but there have been 19 over the last year and 4 months. Yeah.
So let's parse that just a second. So do you think that has more to do with the fact that, because I think there are 2 things happening here. I know that under Joy, there were so many people that just wouldn't report it because they knew she wouldn't do crap about it. So what's the point of bothering? So I think that may be one. And they feel like, with Ryan in place right now, that they have somebody who's at least, or at least a group of people who are going to be somewhat able to listen to what they're saying. So I think that has to do with it. Mm-hmm. I also, sadly, believe that in part it's just a commentary on our society. I think our society is getting so degenerate so quickly. It's kind of like, and we've talked about this numerous times on the show, I mean, it took a long time for our society to get to the point. I mean, it goes up the hill, but at some point, and I feel like this has probably been happening certainly for the last 25 years. Now we're on the downhill side, and it's just a function of physics that once you get to a certain point, it just accelerates. You drop the ball, off the side of the hill, it gets to a certain point, and that ball just starts really accelerating as gravity continues to act on that ball. So I feel like that's kind of maybe partly where we are too, is it's just, I think people see that they're getting away with it. But I think, unfortunately, with the society the way it is, we're almost breeding these kinds of this kind of degeneracy in people. I mean, I don't know, thoughts.
Well, and that's why we need Sherrie's bill also, is to stop those interactions at that adolescent level, to where you have these predators that have such, rewind 10 years ago, you didn't have access.
No.
You didn't have digital access to these kids, instant digital access like you have now. No. So, I mean, that bill is, to me, Sherrie, is just, I mean, it is just monumental to get that thing through and passed.
Yeah, and I think it's going to happen. It went through Senate this week. It was a 10-1 vote.
Oh, good.
The one no vote was a Democrat, and it has its title off right now because there's a few tweaks that we're going to make in some of the language to make it more succinct, which I don't have a problem with. I said from the very beginning that I want this bill to be perfect. I want it to absolutely do exactly what it needs to do in order to, number one, give the opportunity for schools to hold teachers accountable, for them not to be afraid that they're going to get sued because they fire someone over this. And also that the law, says that, you are going to be fired from your job if you interact inappropriately, sexually inappropriately with a child, with a student. And so I don't have a problem making that absolutely perfect, because everything that I do from here on out on this subject will be dependent upon that. One of the things that we're seeing over the last year is that there have been $12.1 million that has cost taxpayers in the state of Oklahoma because schools have failed to protect young people. If you go look, and that's only over, I think it's four different lawsuits. You see in Kingfisher, there was a lawsuit settled $5 million that the school has to pay. Now, part of that $5 million will be paid for through an insurance policy. Part of it will be paid out of a sinking fund, which is taxpayer dollars.
Yes, it is.
And then the other part of it, what I've told, and I don't know the details on this. This is something that I need to get more into. But the District of Kingfisher will have to raise their taxes in order to pay that off. And so, and that's just what I've been told. I haven't verified that. I don't know all of the details there. But I find that,
they should all have to go do car washes or something to do that, because they're the ones who did that, not the taxpayers. Well, they're the ones that allowed that.
And it was school board members that refused to take the issue up and fire these people. Yep. And I think you're going to see the same thing happen in Shawnee. I believe that there's a civil lawsuit that they're in the works working on right now. And so, if they're successful in that lawsuit, Shawnee is going to be responsible for, probably millions of dollars. And it'll come out of insurance funds, sinking funds, taxpayer dollars. And the sad part about that is that
there's one sad part.
Well, yeah, there's multiple sad parts, but when we're talking about the fiscal impact of it, is that number one, the people in the district don't realize that it's costing them money out of the dollars that should be going to teachers and into the classroom, that it's going to be taking money away from the education of our children to pay these people off. And the school board members are not being held responsible. Correct. Because the school is paying for it. Yeah. And they have failed to protect those kids. And so, and the superintendent and the principals, anybody that knew about that did not report it and did not go to the police department to report it. If you go look at we have 2 statutes in the state of Oklahoma that are failure to report language. One of them is in Title 10A, and one of them is in Title 70. And it says that every person in the state of Oklahoma is a mandatory reporter. And that if you believe that a child is being abused, then you report that to, I believe that it says that you have to report that to law enforcement and to DHS. And if that is not reported, so anybody who believed that these people who are sexually abusing our students or inappropriately involved. So, and I say inappropriately involved because there are cases where there are 18-year-old students that are sexually involved with, a coach or a teacher, or somebody who's employed at the school. At 16 years old, here's the problem. Here's one of the other problems is that at 16 years old, you can consent, right?
Yeah.
So
wasn't it Jay Stiegel actually that's trying to raise the age of the consent? I thought it was Jay.
I believe it's Jim Olson.
Oh, Jim. Okay.
Yeah, I believe it's Jim. I'd have to go back and look, but I do know that there is a bill out there trying to raise the age of consent to 18. Yeah. And part of the law enforcement and the judicial system is holding these people who are in power over these people who are of the age of consent. This is what happened out in Shawnee. One of the victims in that case was a student, but he was over the age of 16. Yeah. And I believe he was maybe even 18. But there is still a power dynamic there, which, which is not appropriate. There should not be.
Well, I think that's in the definition of rape. If a person then has a sexual encounter with a person who is subordinate to them. Yeah. So this person has power over that person, then the lever of power is different and it would be considered rape. So I think I may be wrong, but
and that's part of the one of the things that happened in the case in Shawnee is that they even though the individual was age of consent, he's still a student, still a position of power over the student. Right. And that's the reason why he was not charged with any kind of sexual assault or they got him on the digital communication. And that's the reason why he only got 5 years and will probably only serve 2, which also needs to be changed. We've got a bill going through the legislature right now that says that if you are charged with a crime against a child, that you serve the full time. And so I need to find out what that bill number is, see where it's at in the Senate, and prayerfully that will go through. That will definitely help our cause for the sexual abuse that's going inside the school system.
The one thing that's frustrated me, I always say that the one thing, like there's one thing, I mean, there's like 5,000 things, but a thing that frustrates me is that we're in an age, and we have been, I as far as I can remember, this goes back probably, well, let me see. The last year I taught was 23 years ago or something like that. And I know that when I left teaching, it was like this. School systems are inordinately afraid of lawsuits. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea why, because I'm pretty sure it doesn't have anything to do with, well, we don't want to waste taxpayer money, because they're great doing that in many other areas. So I'm positive that's not what this is about.
They lose their jobs. They lose jobs when there's lawsuits. They lose jobs over that.
Oh, okay. And that may be exactly what it is. It's just a protectionist thing. And you may be completely right about that, because I also know that when I was mayor, our attorney was advising us, well, we can get sued over that. We can get sued over that, because I'll tell you that and law enforcement will tell you the same thing. law enforcement has a similar problem to schools. If there's a law enforcement officer out there that is doing things that they should not be doing sexually, and they're found out about it, they're usually allowed to resign and move on to do something else. And why? Because, oh, we're afraid we're going to get sued. And so basically, you literally can't say, even if another town was to call and ask you about an officer and say, hey, do you have it? You can't say, well, they resigned, but it was because we had an investigation that showed that, ABC. We weren't allowed to do that because, oh my gosh, somebody will sue. It's employment law. That is way out of bounds. I don't know how to rectify that situation, but we've got to look into it. I don't know if it's a law. I don't know if it's a thing that goes back to the Oklahoma Bar Association. I don't know what it is, but that's got to be taken care of, because in my personal experience, whether it was in education or whether it's been in municipal leadership, that's the big problem. Well, we can't tell people that this happened.
Yeah.
Well, how is that protecting anybody, Sherrie? How
Yeah.
are we protecting anybody then?
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, there's a couple of different agencies that hide behind that shroud of secrecy.
Yes.
And when you do that, there's so much corruption that can take place because they're able to hide behind that shroud. DHS is a perfect example, and the school system is a perfect example, and then employment law is the perfect example. And so, we've got to figure out a way to rectify those, those problems and those issues, because the general public is not being alerted. So you take into consideration the principals or the teachers or just the employees that are fired from a school because of the inappropriate behavior or conduct with a student. Well, if they're not convicted, they don't go on a sexual predator
that's true
list. And so then they can go get a job at the next school. They can move to another state and get a job, and continue on. You see that problem that happened in, I don't know if you've watched this, but there's a Netflix documentary on the Boy Scouts and the sexual
I need to watch that. I've heard that.
Yeah, the sexual abuse that took place inside the Boy Scouts. And I mean, that's a private organization, and it was rampant, and it was so bad. I mean, I had to stop watching it midstream because it just made my stomach turn. And so once I watched that, and then I started digging into what's going on in the schools, and that was brought to my attention. I had a couple of different victims from 25 and 22 years ago who will never get their day in court because of the statute of limitations. It made me stop. And you sometimes there are issues that just make you go, okay, I cannot ignore this anymore. Just like sex crimes and sex trafficking and that sort of thing. Right. This was one of those things where I stopped, just like the books in the libraries. I had to step back and go, I cannot allow this to continue without trying to do something on this. And so this bill, I think, is going to help. But like I said, it's just the very first step. The next step is we have got to simultaneously educate parents and their children. That we've got to get parents to educate their children on the problems and the things to watch for. So I had let me give you an example. I had an association come to me and ask me to add some language in there to take out. There's a warning piece in there that if a teacher texts a student and it comes out and it's benign, it's just something, about homework or a team or whatever situation, but it gets reported, gets investigated. My bill says that it goes into the teacher's file. Okay. Well, the organization wanted me to remove that warning in the teacher's file. And there's two reasons why I'm not willing to do that. Number one, because any other policy that teacher breaks, that warning is going to go into their file.
It is.
It's going to go in. So this should be no different. And then number two, who's not to say that an employee is not going to test that boundary? Okay, I'm going to do this. It's going to be benign, and I'm going to see what they do with it. And then that could open the door for them to continue on and then do the grooming, right? And so I am not willing to remove that warning piece out of that teacher's file, because anything else, any other infraction that they would have, that warning would go into their file. Now, it's not going to transfer with them to another school district. And if a school were to call and say, hey, would you rehire this teacher? That principal may not be able to say no.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
It is truly the problem. And so, having that warning piece in there, I believe, is a pivotal piece in stopping this, because we cannot give an inch on this. I was also asked by a member to call out the counselors and put an exception in there for counselors. Well, in my research, there were counselors that had sexually abused kids. I'm not gonna limit, because then what happens? Then you get all of these predators what are they going to do? They're going to go pursue a counseling degree so that they are exempted from this. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. There's no one that is not susceptible. And so I was not willing to call anybody out and to give any exemptions there. And so, and then, I've talked about the piece about protecting teachers. And I happened to watch a movie on an airplane, and I had seen it like a dozen times before. It's one of my favorite movies, Crazy Stupid Love. I don't know if you know the movie, but it is what's the actor that's from The Office?
I won't be able to think of it because
I can't think of someone right now. But anyway, he's in that there's several other famous actors in this. Well, in one part of the movie, it's part of the actual whole story. There is a babysitter that is in love with the father of the children that she babysits. So she decides to go to another student in the high school and says to her, hey, I how do you get an older man to pay attention to you? Because this other student is very known to date older men, right? And so, she tells her to, take some pictures and make certain faces, and you'll have to go watch the movie and you'll see what I'm talking about. But anyway, so here's this teenager in this high school who is wanting to seduce the father of the children that she babysits. Yeah. Well, do we think that happens in the schools? Absolutely, it does. And so this bill protects any teacher that if a student gets a hold of a teacher's Snapchat or Facebook Messenger or Instagram or Twitter and sends a private message to this teacher, then it protects that teacher. And I've asked the State Department of Education, please allow me to be part of the training process that you go through for teachers and for educators, because this is something that I want to make sure that they bring to the table, is training teachers to say and make it policy in the schools. I want the school to have a policy that says that a teacher, if you get a message from a student, whether it is, about a homework assignment or whether it is sexual in nature, that you take that to your administrator immediately and you say, look, I got this from a student. I'm being,
I didn't solicit this.
I didn't solicit this. This is from a student. I want you to see I'm being transparent here. I want you to know that this was not me. This was the student. And, that will protect that teacher. And then if the school has the right policy, then that school goes to that parent and tells that parent, look, your kid is, soliciting here with this administrator or this teacher or the coach or the teacher's aide, whatever position that person is holding. I want I want teachers protected here, and I want students protected here, and I want transparency, that parents know what is happening and that they have access to that information so that they can shut it down if it's their student, their child who is, looking for that relationship.
Well, and that makes a really excellent point too, because we had on my old town attorney. I mean, she's still our town attorney, but when I was mayor there, and I brought that up, briefly to her, and she said, well, it's a balancing act because, you don't want to let somebody go or inappropriately say something about somebody who didn't do this. And so we have to be able to protect the employee as well. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think any reasonable person can understand that, but I also think too, that any reasonable person who is employed would come forward and do what you just said and go, hey, I'm hearing that so-and-so is saying this. That's not me. I'm not doing that. So I think that's one thing. But I think another thing too is you can, and I've seen it in the rules for OSDE because I've gone over the rules. You have to have an investigation. There's an internal investigation that goes on. There was an internal investigation that went on in our municipality. There should be in every single one. And you go through an investigation. And if in the investigation you find that person was really committing a crime, being inappropriate, then you should be able to say, hey, the investigation showed blah, I wouldn't hire that person because this is what happened. This is why they were allowed to be removed. So there's this, I don't think it's a balancing act. I think what happens is we end up siding on the one side. And in a way, I can kind of understand it because frankly, white men right now, I mean, it's almost a crime to be a white man. Anybody can say anything about, a person, and my goodness, look at the Me Too movement. I mean, in some cases that was bad because if a woman wanted to get back at another guy, then that's what they would do. And that's not appropriate either. So you do have to weed that out. But the problem is, or the bottom line is, let me say this, the bottom line is children should be protected at all costs. And I don't feel like we're even touching that. I think your bill goes a long way, and we should applaud that bill absolutely for that. But we've got to be better even.
Yeah. And I think that that the other piece of that is that we've got internal investigations going on, just like what happened in Shawnee. They internally investigated that. They didn't do the mandatory reporting to DHS, to law enforcement that should have been done. When they got the report, that should have gone straight to DHS and to law enforcement. And they did an internal investigation and they slapped his wrist. If you go through, right. I have combed through the court documents, and the attorney that represented these victims did a fabulous job in laying out the case and saying, they did an internal investigation. They slapped his wrist, but he did not get fired until there were charges filed against him.
But see, that's wrong.
And it is wrong. And they just kept saying, okay, well, read this book and do a report on it and report back to us. And I mean, seriously, you would be, I was so angry, righteously angry by the time I finished those court documents the first time, that is what really just kind of set me off and just really, that is what sent me down this trail. And then getting, these two young people who are adults now, who were sexually assaulted by their coaches, 22 and 25 years ago. So ultimately, this is what I'm working on now. I have hopes to be able to tell some of these stories from these victims who will never get their day in court through a documentary. And we've got, I'm working on that. I've got some other people who are working on it with me. And so I think you'll see that eventually come out. And it's a very heavy subject. And just like what I said about that,
the Boy Scout
documentary on the Boy Scouts that I could only watch so much of it at a time. I've got a book called Lost in Translation. I don't know if you've read that yet. That I have to. I can listen to it for 30 minutes, an hour maybe, and then I have to just stop and move on to something else. And because it's so disturbing that what is happening to our children. So I do want to protect employees. But in the process, what has happened is that some of the board members have been so heavily focused on in protecting the employee that they have completely failed to protect the children. And so that's where we need to get is that the protection of these children who, I'm going to go back to Shawnee again, and also to Alberto Morahan, who was the leader of that teacher walkout page. He was found to have sexually had a relationship with a 14-year-old at the middle school in Stillwater, and he was sentenced for 5 years. He's already out. And so sentenced for 5, did 2 years. He'll be a sexual predator for the rest of his life, and he's lost his livelihood as far as education goes, as it should be. But I think the same thing that you're going to see with this gentleman in Shawnee. He abused for 17 years. God only knows how many victims he has. Those people will have to live with that for the rest of their lives. And those are boys. Boys tend to deal with this a lot harder on themselves, and they spiral into mental health and drug and alcohol addiction a lot more often than what the young girls do. It manifests in boys different than it does in girls. Some of the same manifestations, but a lot differently mental health wise in boys. And so those young men will live with that for the rest of their lives. This man in Shawnee and the other ones who have only 2 years in, they're out and their lives are disrupted, but not the way it is for the victims. And so we've got adults that are not looking at that. And that's another one of those messages that I want to get out there. I want to warn parents. I want to warn kids. I want to work on this, the rules and the training at OSDE. I want to tell the stories of these victims. I want that. And honestly, my goal is, God willing, that this piece of legislation that I'm running now and anything that follows up with it and the school policies and procedures that come along with it. I've asked the governor for a task force to study this, if we can get that done, so that we can say, these are the steps that we need to go through in order to protect our students. I want to take that message across the United States, so that every state is protecting their kids and that they understand what they can do with it. And I believe it's a timely message. And so that's where I'm headed. I've got 6 years left that I can serve in the legislature. And so who knows what that looks like in my future, but we'll see. I don't know.
Well, I think what you've done, and the kind of the springboard to what you're thinking about doing and what you're planning on doing, I just think that that's phenomenal. And I'm sure I speak for Michael when we say, you're always welcome here to talk about that kind of stuff and try to get that message out, because it really is of utmost importance. If we can't protect our children, who really are the bedrock of our society, frankly, it's not the adults. The children are the bedrock of our society. If we can't protect them.
Yeah. Let me interrupt you there. I one of the things that I wanted to say is that, you were talking about this hill that we've climbed and that we're, kind of going over the edge.
Yep.
Well, if you look at Pew Research, they ask the questions about biblical worldview.
Yeah.
They ask the questions about church going and how often you read your Bible and that sort of thing. And I believe the last number that I saw was 32% of the nation actually are regular church attenders and Bible believers. And so when you when you get to the point where you're less than 50% of the people of the population are believers, without a moral majority, that's when you start actually losing your nation. And I think that's a condition that we're seeing in our nation right now, is that we've got less and less people that actually have a biblical worldview.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I'm going to double down on what you said. So last night, one of my friends sent me a subreddit, and she said, you're going to find this one interesting. So this was the subreddit looking for a non-MAGA church on the Northwest side. Myself and a friend of mine are trying to find a church to try that isn't MAGA, or at least keeps that mess quiet. They can be left leaning because Jesus was a progressive socialist, or apolitical. Thanks much. Now, here are the top responders. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Crown Heights United Methodist Church. I'm atheist. I can't even do this with a straight face. I'm going to try.
I'm atheist.
I am atheist, but they have always had pride flags up and positive messages and just seem like good people. Can second them. I am by no means religious, but I've had nothing but good dealings there. I mean, you can't make this up.
That makes that a secular place for people to go feel good about themselves. There's nothing spiritual about that.
And I think that was what was so phenomenal when you just read the first one. I am atheist, but they're there for me. And you just think, why in the, yeah, I mean, churches are for sinners.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're all sinners. There was only one perfect person. He's not around on earth anymore, so we're not perfect. Church is for sinners. There's no way to get around that. But if you're not even pretending to have the message of elevation, right? We're all sinners, but dadgummit, let's read our Bible. Jesus has plans for us. I mean, well, I'm an atheist. I love it there. Just how do you? So anyway, that's doubling down on what you said, because I mean, it's
and it tells a story about what's happening in our churches too.
Yeah.
I've heard several people. Now, I haven't done any research on this, but I've just heard it talked about that a lot of our places of higher ed that are actually teaching seminary and that sort of thing, that they've adopted some DEI and some very secular views, that there's not even a biblical worldview at some of our seminaries anymore. And so
I think that's been a long time, actually.
Yeah. So if you let me come on, I know that you made in something I read said that this would be the last time that I come on.
No. That would be your last time in the legislature.
Okay.
No, you're always welcome here.
Okay. So
you have a spot. We're not kicking you off of here.
Okay, good, because I've got so much more to tell you. So much more to say to people.
Sorry, you're stuck here.
Oh, good. I'm glad I am, because I love the conversations that we have, one of the things that I want us to talk about when session is over is the concept of biblical worldview. And people, before, I thought there was a biblical worldview and a secular worldview, and there's not. There's a book that I'm going to read as soon as I'm finished with the couple that I'm working on right now. And it's a gentleman, Dr. I'm not sure what his first name is. Myers is his last name. But he wrote a book on worldviews. And so he breaks down the different worldviews that people have. And I find it just extremely interesting. What's the
name of the book? Do you remember?
I will get it for you.
Yeah, because I'd be interested.
Yeah, I'll get it for you. It's in some of my notes. But I find it very interesting, and I feel like This is a topic that needs to be dived into. And people think here's what I've discovered is that people think that that they have a biblical worldview if they're a Christian, but that is not the case. If you don't apply biblical principles to every aspect of the world, and I'm just going to call them spheres or mountains or whatever. This guy that I listen to, he calls them mountains. And I got to go here in just a minute. I've got an appointment. But he talks about family. There's 7 of them, he believes: family, church, government, business, science, and technology, and medical is included in that. And then arts and entertainment and media is in another one. And then I've missed one.
Yeah, you got quite a number of them, though.
Yeah, that's at least 6. And so if where you are, like one of the things that I've been saying that I've discovered through all of this last 6 years is that women, sorry, Michael, but women are a vast majority of the drivers of the economy. We decide what grocery store we go to. We decide what products we put on the table. We decide what stores we shop at. We decide what cars we drive. We are the driving force behind the homes that we buy, in what neighborhoods and in what communities that we buy in. And women, I just find that so interesting. And if you're not taking a biblical worldview and looking at every sphere, like where we buy from, we don't align with Target and what Target pushes. And so therefore you don't shop at Target.
I had a bad dream last night, and it was literally about me shopping at Target.
Yeah. So if you think about it, if you use your biblical worldview to decide who you vote for, what church you go to, what community you live in, what products you buy, what stores you shop at, if you apply that everywhere, then we have a huge impact look at Bud Light, look at Target, look at Disney, look at Netflix, look at, all of these things that in the last 3 or 4 years that we have put our foot down and said, we're not, going to participate in your politics through the economy. And, we've made an impact. And so that's another piece to that story. And so the biblical worldview, it really just overlays everything that if we would use that and apply that in every aspect of our lives, and we truly could have a huge impact on the world. And that's another part of my message.
No, and that's phenomenal. And we've gotten all the way up to almost an hour and 30 minutes. And so God love the people who have hung out in there.
I know. I'm sorry.
And you know what? God love you people, because you're way above the 20-minute, attention span.
That's true.
Have.
10 second attention.
Oh, I'm sorry. 10 second.
Yeah.
Way above that. Well, yeah. So just know, so we'll sign off of here for now, so you can get going, and we'll not exhaust the viewers further. But honestly, you're welcome here anytime. So I'm sorry you got that idea. We just meant that this was the last year and you're in the legislature for you for now. Yeah. But thank you for being here, and thank you for doing what you're doing. And, please, if we need to jump in and do something on that bill, let us know, because it's extremely important.
Yeah, I think it'll get across the board, and I think it'll get to the governor's desk. Next month, we will talk about the culmination of what happened in the legislature, because I think we should be done by then. It's campaign season, election season, and so I believe they'll try to wrap it up as soon as they can. And of course, the earlier we wrap up in May, the less it costs the taxpayers. So I'm all for finishing early and getting out and getting the work done and getting out. So next month we'll talk about the legislature, this session as a whole, if that sounds good.
No, that sounds like a great plan. So thank you for being with us again. Please send me Olivia's information.
I will. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you.
Weekend.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Well, that was wow. I didn't think we were going to go that long. That was a great conversation.
Well, I was going to chime in there multiple times, but my mic, not on the screen. You can mute on the screen on the app, but my mic itself was muted. So I started talking, and then you just were talking, or Sherrie
I
was
did not
talking.
mute you.
No, you didn't. It was my
Okay.
mic. I mean, my physical microphone has a little button on it that you touch.
Need to get a new mic because you keep doing that to yourself.
Yeah. But anyway, I was going to make a point when Sherrie was talking about those internal investigations. That is such a major, major problem. And in my opinion, now this is just my opinion, you'll probably agree with me, but the reason why discipline just in general in schools is so out of control, I attribute it to all those internal investigations, because when you have an issue, the school deals with it, the parent comes in, the parent's a major bully in a lot of these situations. The parent says, you're not going to treat my kid like that, even if the kid is wrong or the kid did it or whatever. So you've just escalated over these years to constantly giving in to a lot of these major discipline problems in the school. But it's because there's no outside agency coming in on behalf of the teachers or on behalf of the school to say, no, you're not going to treat our teachers like that. This is a state issue or whatever. So those internal investigations allow those employees to just get completely swept under the rug, in my opinion, also on the other side of protecting the kids.
Well, and I was going to mention this too. So I've been on numerous boards, well, not numerous, but many boards. And I've noticed something about boards. I've never been on a school board. But here's what has happened in pretty much all the boards we have. And I was sitting on one board where the CFO was actually embezzling money.
Yeah.
And they knew that that there was something wrong, that there was, some embezzlement that was going on there, because nothing was actually happening that we were paying to get done. But I'm telling you, not a person said a thing about it.
Yep.
Not a person said a thing about it until yours truly, with the big fat mouth, came along and went, what are you people doing? I mean, there's a clear problem here. And then people were, oh, yeah, well, no, there's a problem here. Why is that?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's because these people get on these boards and they're obsequious little toads and sit there and do everything that the CFO or the head of the board or the chairman or whatever tells them to do, because they don't want to cause a problem. They don't want to cause a row. Well, if you're on a board, by God, that should be your job.
Yeah. Well,
you should be willing to cause any row that you need to cause to make that board act appropriately.
Yeah, that's the job. And look at just, I mean, the best case that I think we can show on that, just in general, especially with these internal investigations, is that trans incident in the bathroom at Edmond Memorial, Jenny.
For sure.
That whole thing was completely swept under the rug. No one, even other administrators in other schools and other districts, they had no idea. Even teachers, even within Memorial, had no idea. That's how swept under the rug that thing was. Yeah. Had we not went and got that police report, had we not published that article, no one would have ever known about that.
Nope. No, and it made national news, for which, of course, we never got any credit. But that's not the point. Who cares? But the point of the matter is, you're exactly right. And I wonder if maybe what we need to come up with, and maybe what we need to think about, and maybe even talk to Sherrie about as she, transitions out of the legislature and is working on this, maybe the idea is to create an organization that has, some retired attorneys or something that can go in and do an outside investigation. Yeah. But even then, you're going to have schools and other, organizations who are going to say, you can't come in here. We're not going to let you in here. We'll do an internal investigation. And even when I've been on boards that have done, or we've done an internal investigation, they've been done appropriately. but that's not always the case. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just simply not always the case. So, and I
Well,
don't believe that what's going on in schools is that internal investigations are being done appropriately. I agree with you.
well, but ultimately, it comes down to the same thing as always. You have weak school board members that
Yeah.
don't have ethics, that don't have morals, because if the school board members are going to know about, let's say, that bathroom incident, they're going to know about that. There's no way they can keep that away from the school board members themselves. So you have strong school board members that have morals, that have values, that have ethics. That stops all of that stuff, at that point. And there again, it comes back to, they're the people in control.
The
I go
school
back.
board directs the superintendent on every item.
Yeah. They vote,
Yeah.
on literally every single thing that has to do with what's happening in your child's education, from the books they read to the curriculum they have,
Yep.
to the lunches that they get fed.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely 100% right. But again, that's another thing that people don't understand, and that's certainly not what OSSBA tells school board members, because you and I have gotten it straight from school board members' mouths that that's not what they say.
Well,
that they say we're supposed to be obsequious to the superintendent. So it's just,
well, let's not forget what Kendall Sacchieri told us 2 weeks ago, Jenny. Those school board members keep your taxes high.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
It's in their hands. It's in their hands.
She did say that. Well, we are coming up on 1:35, and I know, and God love everybody who's been on. I mean, it's been a great morning. And Sherrie's always a great person to come on and stimulate such great conversations. And we may not always agree, but I think that's the great idea behind having people on. I mean, sometimes it's no fun to just preach to the choir or, bounce off the bubble. It really is a much better idea to get people in that don't always agree, so that we can sit and have a conversation, because that's the only way we learn. The only way we learn. We have to quit stiff arming people that we don't agree with and going, well, I don't agree with them. Well, okay. If you have a conversation, maybe you get somewhere on that. But if you're just going to do this, that's, we're not going to get anywhere.
Well, debate is that actual fulcrum, that moves things.
For sure.
It's debate. It's not just that one-sided, my way or the highway. You're never going to get anything done like that.
No, I mean, you're absolutely.
I want to ask Sherrie probably next time. I just wonder, with her tenure being in as long as she's been in, and how much she still cares, and what, how much it really means to her to do the right thing, represent people, be well above board. Right. I just wonder what her take is on people that have been in like that 10, 12, 14, 16, do they feel the same way? Do they just kind of turn into a cog in the machine? I just wonder what her take is. Do they have even more passion, or are they just zombified and they just do whatever they're told? I just wonder what she thinks about that.
Well, I think it's a sad state of affairs, but everybody knows this is true. It happens in business. It happens every place. And that is, you can only say certain things without offending somebody. And then once somebody gets offended, then you'll have backlash, and they'll try to get you on something. And, it's sad, but I think, Sherrie's in a position where she needs to finish out her tenure.
Yeah.
And, there are not going to be certain things she can say until, she's in a position to not be affected, by blowback. And that's a sad thing to say, but it is what it is. Fortunately, we're not affected by blowback, and we can say whatever we want. That's the beauty of this show. Bring it on. Yeah. Well, we are going to, let's see, next week, we have an entirely different kind of a program. Next Wednesday, we're going to have Katie on. So I shouldn't say that, because we're going to have on our V1 SUT blogger is going to be on Wednesday. She has put out another article It will be in the newsletter. If you're not a member of the newsletter, please go to rope2.org and sign up. All you have to do is the box will pop up, sign up, and you can get the newsletter. So the article will be in the newsletter this weekend or on Monday. So she'll be with us to talk about several different things. She's got several investigations she needs to kind of tie up. So she's going to do that with us. That'll be on Wednesday. Friday, Carmen Greider, who is our normal rope regular, was going to be on, but she's kind of still in the process of getting that website set up. And so she kind of wanted to wait until she had a little bit more to show us. And I was thinking it would be a great time to do something different. So on Friday, we're going to have on a couple, Robbie and Jeff McComas, who are Lincoln County citizens. And what's been going on in Lincoln County is that they have a wind farm company that is coming into Lincoln County and trying to establish wind farms. And they have done an actually spectacular job at pushing back on that. And, you know, the sad thing about it is, Michael, and I hate to say this, but it's true. We often spend time talking about how we're not getting anywhere. We can't do this. You know, we can't fix this. This isn't fixable. We're just, well, we need to talk a little bit about what we can fix and what we can do, because people have got to have hope. Otherwise, they're just going to throw up their hands and go, screw it. I don't even want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So Robbie and Jeff are going to come on Friday of next week and talk about the things that they've been doing to make an impact in their community. And by God, they've been making an impact in their community. So you definitely want to tune in. Well, of course, next Wednesday to see what our V1SUT blogger has to say, but you also want to look on Friday as well and really meet Robbie and Jeff and find out what they're doing in their community. I think you'll really like that a lot.
Can't wait.
That's all I got. You got anything?
No.
Before we wrap up today?
That's it.
Okay. Well, it's going to be a lovely weekend. It's going to be up to 87, I think, before next week. It turns around and goes right back into the crapper again.
Oh, you know what? I was going to tell you. Okay, so we survived the solar eclipse.
Oh, that we did. We're all alive.
We're here.
Yeah.
But what I did is I just took advantage of the weirdness of the solar eclipse. That's, I'm trying to take the metaphysical aspects of whatever, cosmic conditions were. I planted my entire garden during the solar eclipse.
You did not.
So we'll just see what kind of results we get. Maybe all those seeds will be different. The roots will grow deeper. I'll have 10 times the harvest because that's an eclipse garden or something.
I totally am. The scientist in me is all over that. I just can't wait.
Yeah.
To see how that's going to come out.
We'll see.
All right, Bud. Well, it's as usual. It's been a joy to be on with you today. It's been a joy to be on with Sherrie. Have a great weekend. Everybody will, if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, rope2.org, sign up and you'll get one on Monday. And we try to get one out every Monday. And please make sure to tune in on Wednesday and Friday at 9 a.m. in the morning for live, and share this with your friends. Let them know what's going on. Like you say all the time, Michael, what about our show? We're the only one out there. You say this all the time.
Yeah, that's right. We are the only one out there doing this. I mean, who else is doing anything like this? No one in Oklahoma, at least.
Just us.
and we do need your help and support. I mean, anything, our Patreon, you can donate on our website. Even $5 makes a huge difference to us.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And watching and sharing is the most important. So thank you so much for being with us. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Wednesday.